Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. John, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
You probably all know LegalZoom. It's been around for quite a while. But what's interesting about it, and what you may not know, is that it's actually a company that has reinvented itself at least 3 times, from being just a software service where you could get a will document or something like that into a much more full service legal organization. So I think for entrepreneurs, the idea of having to pivot several times, reinvent, or bloodless coup, as you put it, is both an interesting challenge from a business perspective, from an employment and cultural one. So first, start talking about why you had to do your first big bloodless coup.
Sure. I think we have a saying at LegalZoom that sometimes you can't see the mountain until you climb the hill. Then sometimes the mountain that you saw is actually just another big hill, and you see another opportunity. I think part of being an entrepreneur you're solving some problem, but how do you figure out which problems to solve when you're in the thick of the action? And that's kind of where the opportunities arise. So when we started in chapter 1 of our business, we were really into it of the legal industry. So you fill out an online questionnaire and out pops a legal document. So it's really a do-it-yourself software that was kind of a legal document factory, and we were positioned as an alternative to a lawyer. And that was important to get our start because that helped us build a large, high-volume business where we became the largest former of businesses and the largest filer of trademarks. And so it gave us a lot of transactional volume and helped us build our brand. But clearly what people wanted was a combination of people and technology. There's this fear amongst lawyers that what we would do is create robo-law and we're like the Terminator of the legal industry. And our customers, being small business owners, they want lawyers, they just don't want to pay high hourly rates with their control of the hours. So it was more of the costs and business model.
So you were obviously responding to some customers, but did you also sense that you had maxed out in the first phase of the business and you were going to be stuck if you didn't do this?
Well, not really, but we were probably 2 years ahead of a slowing down of the business. So when we moved to chapter 2, which is where we added legal plans, so now we give unlimited advice to small business owners for a year for what a lot of lawyers charge for an hour. So it's, whatever, $2.99, and you can call it an unlimited times to a lawyer. When we started that, our core business was still growing 30+%. So we were still in, relatively high growth mode. It wasn't the 10% month over month type of early stage years, but still it's pretty meaningful growth. But it really was listening to our customer. And they said, well, we really want lawyers. And the regulatory structure prevented us from doing that. So we do what's called a 3-year planning process. So every 3 years, I fire the entire team. And then I rehire them and say, you have no ownership of anything that got us to where we are today. Now what do you want to do with this business? So if you want to cannibalize yourself, but you have to think of a brand new strategy.
You're talking about the whole company?
Yeah, I bring my C team, said you're all fired and you're just rehired. So you have no ownership of anything that has happened before. What is the right strategy from here going forward over the next 3 years? So it's a brief few seconds of unemployment. But a lot of times people don't evolve or take risks or stretch because they feel like, ooh, what got us here was this and I don't want to depart from it, or I want to do something close to it. And I think when you really need to solve a large problem, you have to look at it from a fresh perspective. So sometimes we do bring in new executives.
I was going to say, don't you, in some cases, run into a situation where the skill set of phase 1 team isn't really up to phase 2? And then you have an issue, right?
Yes, that can absolutely happen. And you need to hire the team to get you where you need to go and not to what, brought you there. But in complex businesses, and the law is kind of a regulatory morass of gray and people suing you and left and right, and they've been trying to shut us down. We finally shut down the unauthorized practice of lawsuit, but it cost us $16 million over 11 years, where if we had lost, we could have lost the whole company. So it's a very difficult.
So what did you have to stop doing?
Nothing. We defended ourselves and our right to exist against 26 inquiries and class actions and basically lawyers trying to shut us down. And then now it's shifted to now we're partnering with lawyers. So part of our evolving the strategy now, we're much more the source of revenues for a lot of those lawyers. But I think this kind of fresh start, relook at it, go after it, chart a goal for 3 years without an idea of what got you here is the critical part. But evolving a talent's always an issue. I think sometimes though the folks that, it's like in coding,
Yep.
the folks that have gone through the last 2 or 3 languages learn the next language the fastest. So sometimes that experience or institutional knowledge allows you to pivot or move. Sorry, I won't use that term.
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
it'll allow you to evolve much more quickly.
All right. So you've got phase 2 now. You're in chapter 2, as you call it, and you've introduced these sort of yearly legal subscription plans, I guess you'd call it, right? So then what you had to transition to phase 3,
Yep.
which you did in about, 2012, something like that? 2011,
Well, I say
2012?
2015 was when
Oh,
we really
okay.
started in earnest. So
Okay.
when I look at 2000, 2010, that's LegalZoom Document Factory. 2010 to 2015, we coupled legal documents with legal advice.
Okay.
Right, but they were sequenced where you get a document, you opt into a subscription, and then we helped you from there. And then many of them use this, have used for many, many years for their source of contracts, agreements, et cetera, et cetera. But what we found in chapter 3 is we kind of went through a new 3-year planning process. We looked at it and we went, hey, what really people want is a technology-enabled lawyer, an integrated solution.
From the beginning.
Yes, from out of
Right.
the gate. So what happens if I start an LLC and then I talk to a lawyer and they said, actually, you should have done a Delaware Corp? Well, then you got to redo everything.
Right.
So we had to reinvent a lot of the core. Some of our core is moving to 100% attorney delivered. Sometimes you have the option of using attorney. Other times we're doing it 100% attorney delivered. But we're still doing it with high levels of quality control, fully technology enabled.
But you're not a law firm.
We are not a law firm in the U.S. We are a law firm in the U.K. So
But in the U.S., where a lot of people here are from, you're using contract hired lawyers? Is
So
that-
we partner with about 30 odd boutique law firms, and usually 1 or 2 law firms within a given state. So that law firm may have 30 lawyers dedicated to our clients. So they're third-party independent law firms that we contract to service our customers. But because of the volume of business, they may have a division of 30 or so lawyers that are dedicated
Just to
only
LegalZoom
to
work?
LegalZoom customers.
Interesting. And all the liability and responsibility for their work rests with them.
Yes, they're required to have malpractice insurance, and the law is one thing where you can't contract away your. A doctor can't say, well, regardless of what happens, nothing. I'm not
hospital
responsible
is-
for
right,
my
yeah,
advice to try
right.
and save your life. It doesn't
Right,
work that way.
right.
So yeah, and it's important for our clients that they're third party and independent.
Yep. So now you're at this point where you're not a law firm, but in some ways you're operating like one. You just have these sort of legal separations, right, between you and the lawyers who work with you. One of the things that I'm fascinated by is that I think we're starting to see this as a trend with companies that start out trying to be software as a service providers to consumers for professional services and are realizing that in some way incorporating the human professional is actually essential.
Yeah.
And it's changing some of these business models. And you've obviously experienced that.
Yeah, we've always felt out of the gate we're a platform of people and technology. So the fear is that it's all technology, and you've got these robo-lawyers and IBM Watson. I was in a disruption in the legal industry with Mike from Watson. They were talking about, would artificial intelligence replace the lawyer? People actually want to be serviced. They want a human being. They just, the issue is not that they hate lawyers. They hate the business model of law. They hate, it's a credence good. I can't judge whether it's good or bad advice, but it's an hourly rate, and you basically control how many hours you're working. So it's a feeling of helplessness that is not something that entrepreneurs enjoy, or individuals.
And
So
in your model, can I always get the same lawyer?
we will often put you back and honor your request to talk to the same lawyer, but the law is a bit like medicine. So if you are going around a small business contract, you never know the contract, sure, you can go to the same lawyer. But if you're doing if you're involved in small business litigation and now you have a tax issue, you actually may need to see a tax specialist. So in the same way, you don't go to your pediatrician for everything.
Right.
If sometimes you need an orthopedic, sometimes you
Right.
So we look at the disciplines where someone is very, very good at something. And what we'll do is actually serve as more of your primary care lawyer. So we want our boutique law firms to be your primary care lawyer. And what they'll say is, I will take care of the bulk of your needs. I understand small business law and kind of hiring, et cetera, but then when you get to something specialized like an employment issue or a tax issue or litigation, we'll refer you out to someone that I trust. And we're responsible for the entire supply chain.
And what if, I think a lot of people like to just be able to pick up the phone and get a lawyer on the phone to give them sort of a little bit more general advice. I'm thinking about pushing into this area. There are some minefields, right? It's not like I have a task or a contract or something to look at.
Well, that's the thing that we found is that small business owners had a lot of legal issues pop up, but because they didn't have a relationship with someone that they trusted or that they thought they could afford,
right,
they ended up not asking the question. So that's why we designed this service, so you never have to think about picking up the phone. And what we're doing now with our new mobile app that comes out, basically you say, hey, I want to talk about this issue. We'll automatically match you to someone's expertise licensed in your state. We'll reach right into that lawyer's schedule and then match yours. And so you don't have to call anyone. You say, hey, he's available or she's available for a half an hour consultation at 2 o'clock today or at 10 a.m. tomorrow. And then you could book right there, slide it in, and they'll generally call within the first minute or two of the appointment. So it's a very punctual.
Uber for lawyers.
Yeah.
So are you finding that there's some price sensitivity at some point for these more human and specialized services?
Yeah, we're actually probably on the wrong side of price, where we increased prices once 50% and there was no change in adoption, no change in retention. But I didn't feel the product was where it needed to be. It took us about 2 years in working with our boutique law firms to get their net promoter scores north of 70%. So it was very difficult.
What's a net promoter score?
So we do one question. Net promoter is a kind of methodology. You ask how willing you refer to friends and family. So basically it's a way of benchmarking, a surprise and delight experience.
This
so
is a survey of the customer.
Yes.
Right, okay.
So
they're
best
rating the lawyer.
companies are 70+%.
Right.
Great companies typically 50% or so. We run around 65% for our core business, and now lawyers went from 6% to 70-odd% with a lot of technology and training.
And how many employees now?
1,000.
And how many of those are engaged in vetting new boutique lawyers that you want to bring on to your stable of?
So we have a
contract
dedicated
services?
specialized team that only works with our law firms in the U.S. that both vet, and then every individual lawyer has a publicly available net promoter rating. And every review. So many of our lawyers have 1,000 reviews, 500 reviews, et cetera. So it's a full accountability. And so we actually created an ecosystem where if a lawyer drops because the clients are not appreciating the advice or their bedside manners or whatever it may be, their ratings will drop and the law firm will typically drop them. We don't control that. It's their choice.
Does the customer get to see the rating?
Yeah, it's all
transparent.
every review.
Yeah.
There is no taking. A lawyer may respond to review, they can't take them down.
Okay.
So we've created a system that basically sets up accountability so the law firms know how each lawyer is doing, and we can judge each law firm by a composite of their 20-odd or 30-odd profiles. And so we have, it's a very metric-based approach, and we've done 250,000 of these one-on-one consultations. So we actually get to pretty statistical significance fast.
So you mentioned in the UK you actually can function as a law firm, and you purchased a law firm in the UK. So how is the experience for a British entrepreneur different than for a US entrepreneur?
So we're early going. So we bought a law firm. So we have about 200 Zoomers in the UK as of February. So we're a couple months into it.
Right.
I was just there last week. It's great. The culture's kind of buzzing. The experience will be a little bit different because in the US, I feel like in trying to innovate and create cost-effective, high-quality solutions, I feel like we're a boxer with one hand tied behind our back. Because there's things we can't do, things we can't say. You know, sometimes we go from point A to point B, we take 6 steps instead of a straight line. In the UK, because of a very different regulatory structure, we're allowed to go in a straight line. So in some ways, some of the solutions will be far ahead of what we can do here. So we're going to learn.
What's an example of that?
So, for example, when it comes to litigation, employment law, or business litigation, we might help a lot of people through that, but we don't participate at all in the economics of it. So it's a referral, that's to the law firm, they participate. In the UK, we actually can control the entire experience. So we can bring on board litigators, hold them similarly accountable, and basically do everything that a law firm can do. We basically are a law firm.
Does that mean that it will be in some sort of equivalent currency more expensive for service in the UK?
No, I expect it'll be similar to what we do here, that if you do anything at scale using technology, it should be a better customer experience that's more efficient. So we have a rule at LegalZoom that if you cannot engineer an experience at a higher quality level with at least a reduction of 50% in the cost structure, we don't start. So typically we look for an 80% reduction in the cost structure with objective success metrics and quality metrics that are significantly higher. So we're going to follow the same philosophy in the UK, but their law is different. I mean, they have conveyancing, and we don't have conveyancing here. So that, you know, there's a lot of things that are quite different there.
What keeps you up at night?
Culture, large part of it. You know, I asked 3 years ago for the team that we needed to increase the pace of innovation. It didn't make sense to me, this heuristic that the larger you get, the slower you get. You know, you get settled down by technology or process or legal or whatever it's going to be. So I said, it doesn't make sense. We're larger, we have a bigger team, we're more specialized, we have more knowledge, we have more capital, our brand's bigger. We should be moving faster. So, you know, tasked the team to increase the pace of innovation, and we started just churning out a lot of new products to the point where, you know, you have some casualties on the team.
Right.
Because it's a pace that people weren't accustomed to. You know, people were.
And did you see a quality reduction? I mean, there is a physics of bureaucracy that is pretty well established.
There's culture, there's systems, there's processes. So a lot of people think of Agile Scrum as a software development methodology. I don't really think of it that way. I think of it as innovation in cross-functional teams with high degrees of accountability. So while it grew out of software, this is how my legal and marketing and product and tech teams come together to create something in 21-day sprints. So I think part of the bureaucracy is the systems that you set up. You know, and you want small cross-functional teams empowered to go after it. They know how to keep score. They know what resources they're getting. They know what they have to hit. And so then it's a very different process. So it was painful to get everyone trained and up to speed. But now the velocity and quality is extremely high. And it's actually, we're moving faster with, I think, a greater degree of success than we ever have.
Well, that's a good place to stop. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, and say hi to John Suh.